world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is January 30th as I'm recording this. And recording this a little later in the day, but I'm glad I did. This will probably end up going up right around midnight tonight. Thought about skipping today's podcast and going into tomorrow, but I've got so much to talk about. I might just do two podcasts back to back and get it out there because we had some things that happened today. And as I say every day, we've got a lot to talk about because there's always a lot to talk about. Now, before I get into any of the news and politics, you may have noticed I had a couple podcasts in video form missing over on YouTube the last couple of days. Don't know what happened, but apparently the automation program I've been using to upload everything, for some reason, changed the targets for my uploads from long form to short and kept saying that my podcast wasn't valid. It was skipping it because it was too long. Well, I had to reset up a whole new thing, got it going, got everything uploaded, and we should be back on track. So that's why you had 3 podcasts drop today from the last few days in video form over on YouTube. Now, when I say we got a lot to talk about, well, something happened today that I wasn't expecting. We got a whole ton of stuff from the DOJ when it comes to the Epstein files. And we are talking millions of documents, like 3 million documents, 100,000 plus images. I think the number I saw was like 180,000, something like that. Thousands, tens of thousands of videos, all coming out of the Epstein files, right? Now, this is not everything the DOJ has. The DOJ had even more, but what they have not released is what they are saying pertains to an ongoing investigation. Now, the little bits we have gotten, I've seen some people that are digging into it, and it is not looking good for Donald Trump and anybody else in the files. For example, one of the things they had in there, and this was reported by a major news network, involved Bill Gates. Now, I could give two shits less about Bill Gates at this point, but at one time, he's still a rich man, and he was rather influential. But there's apparently an email from, I think it was 2013, but doesn't entirely matter, where Bill Gates and Jeffrey Epstein were talking, and apparently Bill Gates caught something from a girl provided to him by Epstein. And not only did they talk about it, but apparently Epstein had provided Mr. Gates with the antibiotics to treat whatever he caught. Now, don't know if that's true, but the fact that it's in there is pretty telling, and that there were emails about it. Now, we will see if anything comes to light from it. And if anybody gets charged. Now, Todd Blanche, the Assistant Attorney General, who's been kind of overseeing everything Epstein related, was asked point blank if we were going to get any information about the clients of Epstein, about the people who did all of these horrible things to these underage girls. And he basically looked like a deer in the headlights. And he starts stammering and stuttering, and he goes, well, our position is that, just like we said before, if we had any information on anybody who did these things to these young women, we would charge them. Something to that effect. Well, no, I don't believe you would have, because you have been trying to tell us that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell trafficked these girls to no one. You're telling me in 3 million plus pages, and this is about half of what they had outstanding to release. That so in a grand total of like 6.5 million pages of documents and testimony and information, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of pages of witness statements, and all of these things, plus all of the physical evidence, etc. The pictures, the videos, all of it. That there isn't a shred of anything in there connecting Jeffrey Epstein to any client. I find that ludicrous. It's bullshit on its face. And as we are looking at it and we're digging in, apparently there is a lot of information about a lot of people. Now, everybody's wondering about Donald Trump. Is he named? And yes, there are times when Donald Trump, from the creators I have seen and the things I have seen about the Epstein files, Donald Trump is talked about. There apparently is a witness statement to the FBI. One of the victims talks about how her friend, who was 13 to 15 years old at the time, was apparently forced to perform orally on not Bill Clinton, Donald Trump. Maybe on Bill Clinton too. I don't know. I don't know how Bill Clinton has been listed in there. But it was on Donald Trump. And supposedly, while being forced to do this, she supposedly, if any of this is true, bit Donald Trump. Now, don't know if it's true. It sounds plausible. I couldn't imagine being in a situation where a friend is and I don't know that the friend was the one forcing you to do it, or if the friend just introduced you to Epstein. The witness who talks about their friend being forced to do some stuff to Epstein, I believe, was a victim of Epstein herself. Or it could have been that the friend was a victim. I am not 100% sure there. And there is so much that's going to come out. It is going to be hard for this administration to cover it up. There's even more telling stuff in there. And it's going to be horrendous. Now, according to one of the creators I trust, I'm sure you've heard of him, Aaron Parnas. Aaron Parnas has said that they've gone through some of it themselves. And according to Aaron and a few other creators, that it is not redacted the best. It was sloppily done. Keep in mind, they are about a month and a half behind schedule. But it was still sloppily done. That you had victims who were publicly identified already, that you were able to search them by name in this database, that you had victims that were yet to be publicly identified who had been going by monikers like Jane Doe and others, that you could find their real name and you could figure out who they are. Now, this is a bad situation for Donald Trump and the DOJ. It's going to be embarrassing for them. Not because of the content of the files necessarily. That's going to be bad too. But how piss poor they did when they still delayed it and said they needed more time. Now, just the other day, they had put out a court filing trying to fend off a judge who was getting pissed and was in theory considering contempt charges. That they needed more time. It was going to take even longer to get these files out. And now we have this big, huge document release. And, apparently Prince Andrew is in the files that has been released. And there's going to be so much. Now, the bots are already out. I'm already seeing the MAGA accounts, the far right accounts, the ones that have very little of a profile picture, some generic username like Trump's your daddy or MAGA for life or always MAGA or something like that, coming in. And I've seen them on my videos and others talking about this. Well, what about Bill Clinton? What about Bill Clinton? Who gives a fuck about Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton has not been the president for over 25 years at this point. We're not talking about him. We are talking about the sitting US president. And because this is still fresh and we don't know what is all going to be or what is all in there because there is so much to dig through. We don't know if they are going to find what I consider to be like the one thing they needed that can be enough to go after Donald Trump. Now, I think what Republicans are kind of hoping for is that in this release that they find something that they can use. And why would Republicans want to get rid of Donald Trump? Well, he's a cancer on their party, right? And he's going to take them down with him as he goes down. He is going to burn the Republican Party on his way out the door, and he could potentially cost them the House and the Senate and the presidency for a decade. Maybe more, depending on how bad it gets, because of everybody having supported him in the past. So what are they looking for? Well, they're looking for anything. And I keep saying it'll only take one or two good images. And not that they're good in what the content is, but one or two, clearly provable images that are real. That, you can prove were not photoshopped, that you can get some corroboration on from somebody either in the photo or that there's other documents that support it, etc. Maybe even something where it's an email exchange between Epstein and Donald Trump that confirms everything. And that once they have that, they are going to make a move. I think the Republicans will make a move on Donald Trump over the Epstein files. Why? Because they don't want to have to answer to their voters for protecting somebody who did these despicable things to children. Okay? I think they make that move. But they need that piece of evidence that they can't deny what it is, right? Now, why? Well, there's like 30% of the Republican Party that is diehard MAGA. And for the most part, that diehard MAGA base would not move on Donald Trump, regardless of what he did. However, with one solid piece of evidence, that proves he did something, a significant portion, not all, because there's a few that will forgive anything Donald Trump would do for the sake of owning the libs. But there's a good number that would say, okay, that's a bridge too far, and we have to do something to stop it. And we are willing to vote against, Republicans, or, that we can't stand with that, right? And I think Republican lawmakers are hoping to find that one thing that can save them with the voting base. So that way they can have their chances of getting reelected even better. Now, like I said, they were over a month past the deadline to release these files. And one of the reasons they've given for the delay was the pure size of everything they had to go through. And like I said, they released about 3 million files. That's a lot, but that was only about half of what they had. Now they are again claiming ongoing investigation. Now I don't know what they plan to do or what kind of an investigation they are going to hold with that. But they are still keeping some of the stuff back. Now, could we still see it at some point? Most definitely. Are we going to see it at some point? I think so. I was not expecting the DOJ to release this much information at all. As of yesterday, even, we had only gotten released several 100,000 pages of documents, which is still a lot, but it was considered to be a percentage of what, like around 1% of what the total files were in possession of the DOJ. And now here we are, we have 3 million to dig through. And Donald Trump is going to have to answer for him being mentioned, etc. Now we are going to see how he reacts to being mentioned. And this isn't the first time he's been brought up as being connected to Jeffrey Epstein. It's a known thing that he was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein said for years that he considered Donald Trump a mentor. Okay. Now, we've been talking about this story that has been going out for a while, and I can't verify that it's true. And I don't know that there's anything in the file release that came out today that will verify it's true. But we were talking about Sasha Riley. Now, Sasha Riley comes out and says he was abused by Epstein as a young boy, including spending some time with Donald Trump. And he claims to be responsible for Donald Trump needing to wear adult diapers. That at least at one point while he was being abused, he'd had enough. He took a tent stake, wrapped it in a condom, and supposedly shoved it up Donald Trump's ass. I apologize if you were eating when I mentioned that. I don't want to give you that visual. But supposedly that all happened. But that's not the important part out of what Sasha Riley said. I mean, that's bad. And if there's anything in the files that could prove that, that would be amazing. But Sasha Riley said that Donald Trump was actually the kingpin, not Epstein. That Epstein was the fall guy, effectively. And that could make sense, especially considering that they were friends, despite what Donald Trump wants us to believe. Again, don't believe your lying eyes. That they were friends, and that Donald Trump wasn't just a friend, but like I said, Epstein thought he was a mentor. Well, according to Sasha Riley, it wasn't just a mentor, that Donald Trump was the actual kingpin of it all. And I don't know that there's anything in this latest batch that proves that, but nothing in there is going to be good for this administration. So in these files, I was just reading a little bit of what was going on here, and multiple people surrounding Donald Trump appear to be in the files. There are conversations and emails from Elon Musk talking about Musk attending some event at Epstein's Island at Little St. James, and talking about how many people would be on the helo, the helicopter. And Musk apparently says it was just going to be himself and his wife at the time. Now, it's unclear as to whether or not they actually attended whatever event around the time that was written. But the fact that he is mentioned is very bad news for Elon Musk, drawing up fresh criticism of Musk surrounding everything there. And then here it says Howard Lutnick, the billionaire businessman who is Donald Trump's press or commerce secretary, once planned a trip to the island. According to documents, that was supposed to be in 2012, years after Lutnick said he had cut ties. And that's not the only thing that came out. Now, there was also an email to Ghislaine Maxwell talking about some article in New York Magazine about Jeffrey and how good Ghislaine Maxwell looked in the photo spread of that. This was before Epstein was found out to have been involved in everything he was involved in and was disgraced. And it was signed Melania. Now, it could be somebody else entirely, or it could be the current First Lady of the United States. There has been rumors that Melania was introduced to Donald Trump through Epstein. And we don't know if that's, I don't know for sure that that's true. That's been something I've heard, but I haven't seen any concrete proof of that. But I believe she knew Epstein. And if that was her in this email, uh, she knew Ghislaine as well. Now, the DOJ is saying that this is everything that's going to come out. There is just so much here. We're talking millions of pages of stuff and everything being redacted. Now, there are a lot of people out there that are connected to Donald Trump and to Jeffrey Epstein. And I don't know if any or who is going to ultimately be held accountable. Now, Todd Blanche, like I said earlier, was talking about how if they knew anything about who was going to be or who had abused these young women, they'd be charged. Well, then why haven't they been charged? Clearly, you have information, you have tips. There was a slideshow connecting a whole bunch of people to Epstein and other people who had been accused. You guys did not act on. You guys compiled credible lists of all of the mentions of Donald Trump in the files. Now, just because he is mentioned does not mean anything. Apparently, some things were news clippings and other articles um, where they were able to connect Epstein and Donald Trump through being at the same event. And that does not imply guilt, just being there, especially if it was something done in public. Now, when it comes to all of this could be the one thing that brings Donald Trump down. Like I said, I think Republicans are looking for a way to get rid of Donald Trump. They know he is bad for them, that he is bad for their reelection chances, he is bad for their future of the party. And they're looking at here is they have an opportunity. Okay. They have an opportunity to be rid of Donald Trump. And if the right piece of evidence comes out in any of this where they can link Donald Trump completely, they could draft articles of impeachment and probably have him gone. Why? Because Republicans don't want to have to answer to their voters. That is one of the things they are most afraid of, is answering to the voters for Donald Trump and having to explain to the voters why they are protecting somebody who is in the files. And as I talked about, when it comes to whatever decision they decide to do with Donald Trump, whether it's because of Epstein, whether it's because of the economy, or it's over something else like invading Greenland, when they make the move, it is going to be a dog pile. Remember, the only reason we even have this treasure trove, or this trove of documents anyway, of Epstein related information to dig through is because they passed the Epstein Transparency Act. And the Epstein Transparency Act started with a few Republicans saying, okay, we need to release it. Enough's enough. We got to find out who was responsible for hurting all of these young girls, these underage girls. And the public needs to know what was going on. Now, I think some of the Republicans that were on board were hoping it was going to be more Democrats and there was going to be more damage for the Democratic Party than there really was. But they pushed forward and they got to 218 votes on a discharge petition. All right. And then suddenly, like, they took weeks. Remember, the House got shut down, the government got shut down. They refused to swear in a duly elected member of the House of Representatives for like 6 weeks, depriving her constituents of a voting representative, all because they were trying to hold some power over the budget fight, because that was when the government was shut down. And they were also trying to make it so that they didn't come to 218 votes to bring this to the floor for a vote in the House of Representatives with a discharge petition. And then suddenly Donald Trump flipped the script. Now, he thought he bought himself some time and that he was going to be safe by saying, okay, yeah, go for it. Go ahead and pass it. It's fine. Because he knew there was going to be some that voted for it. And he was thinking it would get over to the Senate. They'd stall it out for several weeks and he'd be fine. It would buy him more time. Well, when he said vote for it, they voted for it. It was all but almost completely unanimous in the House of Representatives except for one vote. And then in the Senate, they passed it with unanimous consent. Nobody voted against it. And I think when they make that move on Donald Trump, and especially if it's Epstein related, you are going to see similar numbers on articles of impeachment and on a conviction at trial. And as I said the other day, I think what's going to happen is when they make that move, when they ultimately decide it's time, it's going to start out, they're going to come out and they're going to hold the vote. And a lot of times those votes go 5, 10, 15 minutes, something like that. And they go around and they've got a little keypad in front of them and they all vote yes or no. But you can change your vote the whole time it's open. I mean, in theory, I guess if you wanted to, nobody does it, but you could sit there and tippy tap all the way through as long as you ended up on the side that you wanted to be on. Well, I think what you're going to see is you're going to slowly see those yes votes come in, and you're going to see some no's. And then as soon as it crosses 218, if there are articles of impeachment, especially for Epstein, that's when you are going to see the Republicans go full force, and it's going to pass with like 350, 400 total votes. I shouldn't say Republicans because there's not that many in the House. And then when it goes to the Senate, I think it's going to be quick as well. I think they are going to move rather quickly through the trial process, and Donald Trump will be out on his ass. Now, with everything coming out now, and you're going to be hearing more and more in the coming days and weeks as these millions of documents are dug through. It's not going to be something unless there is one extremely damning picture out there or something that ultimately proves what happened with Donald Trump, that he is 100% guilty. I don't think it's going to be something where we get a resolution like over the weekend, right? Especially since the House isn't even planned to be back until Monday. But it's going to keep the pressure on, and Donald Trump, I guarantee, was losing his damn mind. This comes in the heels of some of the other things that are going on. We find out that the trade deficits that Donald Trump talked about when it came to trade, when he was talking about his tariffs, he kept saying, well, our trade deficits. We buy more from you than you buy from us. You need to buy more, is what he was talking about with all these other countries. But considering that a lot of other countries have populations smaller than some of our states, it's no wonder they buy less from us, and they're typically not as wealthy of a nation compared to us overall. Again, it's no wonder they're not buying stuff. Well, he kept saying, well, we need to shrink the trade deficit and do better. And guess what? It's gone the other direction. Okay, Donald Trump, that's some pressure. Then Donald Trump was sitting in an Oval Office meeting yesterday, and he appeared to doze off. And this is trademark Donald Trump. He thinks he's got you, right? He thinks he's been so clever and he's come up with something that you can't refute. And he goes, "Well, I wasn't closing my eyes. I was just bored and I wanted to get the hell out of there." And he talks about how it was a 3-hour cabinet meeting and why, how he was just bored. Well, here's the thing. This administration has been the one to set up these televised cabinet meetings. They wanted them all televised. It was Donald Trump's idea. He wanted them 3 or 4 hours long, in part because they were trying to show how fit he was for the job and how transparent he was, because they kept blaming the administration, the Biden administration, for not being transparent and not doing things like this and not having cabinet meetings, etc. And how, oh, well, we don't know what's going on. So they were going to try to prove that they were better than the Biden administration. And now we find out, and it's no surprise, he was bored. The only times he was ever really paying attention was when they were all going around the room saying nice and pleasant things about Donald Trump, when they were kissing his ass. But when they got down to actual work and talking about what was going on and in the world and everything, he gets bored, his eyes start to droop, and next thing you know, he's asleep. Donald Trump is sparking more and more concerns about his health. I think it was either in that cabinet meeting or it was in the executive order signing that was right after it. And he's literally looking right at R.F. Kennedy Jr. and he goes, well, where's Bobby? Where's Bobby at? Like he couldn't see him. he is sparking more and more concerns about his health. Now, we haven't heard that Donald Trump has gone golfing in weeks, which is unusual because Donald Trump loves golf. And I mean, what else would you expect from somebody who owns multiple golf courses? That they enjoy golf. And that was one of the things in the trademarks of his first administration is that he went golfing every weekend. And how much money he spent on golfing. Well, now he's not going, at least not that we're seeing. Makes you wonder if he's even healthy enough to golf. You add in the fact that, he's clearly suffering from some kind of dementia. I talked about it the other day where he was talking about his father and he couldn't remember the word dementia. And Caroline Levitt had to chime in for him. It's going to be this thing with Donald Trump. As the pressure mounts, you got the pressure from Epstein, you got pressure from everything. It's only going to make his symptoms worse. And he may not be able to hide the fact that he is not well enough to do these things anymore. Now, Donald Trump with his health, and we've talked about his health before, right? This, if it was just one symptom, I wouldn't be as worried or thinking that his time is limited. But you add in the fact he's not really golfing anymore. You add in the bruising on his hands when he was in Davos, Switzerland, and when he was in Alaska when they rolled out the red carpet, that he couldn't walk a straight line. And he's done it several other times. He's had other memory lapses where he can't think of a word. And he just is lost. You got him falling asleep in public numerous times. All of it points to problems with his health. And I don't know that his health holds out all the way to 2029. I just don't. I think it's going to be a situation where his health gives out and he's not going to resign on his own. The Republicans are either going to have to 25th Amendment him or they are going to have to, uh, you know, wait to see if his health gives out. I don't think they can talk him into resigning. Now, maybe they could, but I just don't know. I don't know if they could do that or not. I don't think his ego would let him resign because of health, because he wants us to believe he is the fittest person ever. He wants us to call him the Superman president, which he's not, um, or superhuman, or something, some bullshit like that. Anyway, doesn't matter. Donald Trump is not healthy, and when you got a diet that consists of I think his favorite meal at McDonald's was something like 2 filet of fish, a Big Mac, a couple of large fries, and a Diet Coke. I mean, that's a lot of food, and you're eating that multiple times a week. He's not going to be that healthy. Now, he wants us to believe he's the healthiest person to ever hold the job, and it's just not true, especially considering that, you know, Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton, is younger overall than Donald Trump is today. And he was elected 25 years ago. I think Bill Clinton is actually 79. That means Bill Clinton would have been what? It was 25, 30, 33 years. He would have been 45, 46 when he got elected, something like that. You're telling me that Donald Trump, near 80, is in better physical shape than a guy in his 40s? It's just not happening. That there's nothing that makes me believe that that was a thing. Donald Trump is not doing well, and he doesn't want us talking about it. So he's doing all kinds of stupid shit in order to get us not talking about it. Now, one of the things that he's doing, he went to True Social. Or no, he was actually no, he wasn't True Social. This was an interview, and he was talking to a reporter about this deal that China and the UK and China and Canada are working on trade deals. And he said, well, it'd be horrible for Great Britain or the UK if they had a deal with China, but it'd be worse for Canada. Oh, it'd be a very bad deal. It'd be a very bad thing. Oh, they wouldn't be able to, China would make it so a deal with China would mean you wouldn't get to play hockey anymore. What? Why would a trade deal with China mean no hockey? One, China doesn't deal really in the sport of hockey. Two, why would China care if Canada played hockey? Like, none of it makes sense, right? But that's where his brain's at because he correlates Canada with hockey. He's saying, well, if they get a deal with China, what's the worst thing that could happen to a Canadian? Oh, they can't play hockey. Now, maybe what he meant was that he would put pressure on them to not accept a deal, or their hockey teams could not play in the NHL. They wouldn't allow the Canadian team to travel to the United States, and maybe they wouldn't send the American teams travel to Canada. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of. But even then, that seems a bit extreme for Donald Trump. That's not his typical style. And it's not his style for that vague of a threat. He usually comes out with something way more obvious. I think in part because he doesn't think in those shades of gray or that kind of uh let me be covert with what I'm saying anymore. He just comes out and says it and he doesn't care. But I don't know what he meant by saying that a trade deal between China and Canada would mean the Canadians can't play hockey. I don't know if he knows. Um, he also was talking today, and I believe this was on True Social actually, about Cuba. And he's talking about a new tariff system. Now, his idea for this tariff system is going to be basically that we put reciprocal tariffs on, or we put these tariffs on China, Russia, and anybody else who sells Cuba oil. And with this tariff system, he called it an ad valorem tariff, which means basically value of. So it would be like, I don't know if it would be a sliding scale where if your product costs more, the tariff percentage is higher. So not only would it naturally be more because it costs more than everything else, but then because it's charged an even higher percentage, it's going to cost even more on top of that. I don't know if that's what they meant or what, but basically they're saying anybody who deals in oil to Cuba would be facing these tariffs from the United States and all sorts of economic sanctions, etc. Now, Cuba is a poor country. We know this. There are still all kinds of trade embargoes and things where and sanctions where Cuba can't get a lot of resources without going through certain channels, at least the way I understand it. But now Donald Trump has been forcing this whole deal with Cuba lately. And he's been talking about it ever since they went into Venezuela. I don't know if his plan is to try to smoke them out and force them to join the United States or what, but he wants to put more pressure onto Havana, Cuba, the capital of Cuba. So he's got this plan for tariffs that would include more tariffs for Canada and China. And well, not China, Russia, China, and other places. Um, I don't know if it's going to work. It also had something about for any group or any country that supports terrorist groups that they would also potentially be facing sanctions. All right, so they did pass the funding bill in the Senate. Now, the government is still going to shut down. It's going to be shut down for a couple of days. Now, technically, the government will be shut down over the weekend, but typically it shuts down over every weekend because it doesn't do anything. So I don't know if it's going to affect any sort of national parks or anything like that. If that's going to be affected, like some government shutdowns, I don't think this is going to happen this time. Um, but why? Why is the government shutting down? Well, back in November, when the government was fully shut down, Republicans and Democrats came to a deal. Remember, we hated Democrats at the time for giving in. and they gave in. They allowed the Republicans to open the government back up. Well, and we thought the Democrats had played or got played by the Republicans. Turns out, well, at least right now, what they got out of it saved the country in a way. Because by getting the deal they got back in November, that keeps things like food stamps, Medicaid, and other programs getting access to funds. Now, that means none of that stuff is, even if the government shuts down, all of that stuff is funded. They're funded until September. Now, what I expect in September is that they end up coming up with another deal. There would be yet another kick the can down the road deal, probably to late January, February, maybe even March. Why? Well, because after the midterms, that's when the new Congress is set to take over. And that would make sense. Now, this deal that the Democrats got was actually pretty good. And why I say what the Democrats did in November helped this time was because it took the threat of, well, people aren't going to be able to eat. We can shut the whole government down and nobody will get their food stamps, nobody will have their health care, nobody will get their child care money, all of those things off the table. That was the big thing that put a lot of pressure on Democrats to get anything out of the last shutdown. As people started suffering, Democrats said, well, we better give in because it's going to get worse. And we knew it was going to get worse because of what was offered that was offered to the Republicans. They offered a 1-year straight extension of the Affordable Care Act subsidies. 1 year. No riders, no tricks, no anything, just current funding level 1 year. And Republicans said it was a non-starter. They weren't going to do it. Well, that's why the government shut down. That was part of it. Okay. Then they got this extension. Now, this time, were they fighting for the ACA subsidies? Not really. They're still talking about it. I just don't think anything's going to happen with those subsidies. I was surprised that they were allowed to lapse because I think it is politically disadvantageous for them to do that. Like, it's going to hurt Republicans in Congress or in the midterms, as they know, as the American people know, the blame for any sort of government shutdown and any sort of anything lapsing right now lands at Republican feet because they have both houses of Congress and the presidency. Well, here's the thing. What did they get out of this current deal? They are going to fund almost everything that still needed to be funded. The Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, the DOJ, the IRS, and one or two more agencies. There was like 5 major spending bills that all got funded till the end of September. Why September? Because that is the end of the fiscal year. And I think in September, when it comes up, they are going to vote to extend it again, getting past the election. Okay. But this deal funds almost everything. The only thing left on the chopping block is Department of Homeland Security and ICE, mostly specifically. Now, Democrats have a list of demands, and we don't know what's going to happen with those demands if they're going to actually be met. But some of this has bipartisan support. Now, they are putting a 2-week Band-Aid on DHS funding where it stays at the current levels and then it runs out. So that they would have to come to some kind of terms. Now, what the Democrats want are things that would tone the temperature down in this country. They want to end the roving immigration enforcement that ICE is currently doing, where they can just roll into a city, start basically walking around, going up to random cars for no other reason than just stop and show me your papers. Walking up to random citizens and saying, show me your papers. And you would think you wouldn't have to put that on paper, but apparently with this administration you do. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to say that's what Democrats and some Republicans want to put in there. Now, this is going to be a bigger fight as far as getting that done. But I think they've got a good chance of actually getting it done. I just don't know if Donald Trump will sign it. Maybe if he does, because I know he's terrified of losing the midterms. Maybe they can talk to him that way, saying that this is their only chance to, you know, not get completely blown out in the midterms would be to back everything off. But that's where we're at, right? They are saying we need to fix what's going on with DHS and ICE. So they are looking at doing that, ending the roaming ICE immigration crackdown. So they're not just going to be out wandering the streets, marching around, looking for people, pulling up to businesses and just going in without a warrant and just looking for anybody. And some of that lawlessness is going to get reined in that way. A few other things that are going to happen. You are going to see a large number. They want to put into a place that all ICE agents must be easily identifiable. That means no masks. And one of the reasons why they are so courageous right now with what they're doing is they're wearing masks and they're not really identifiable. So you don't know who's who. And they think they're going to get away with everything when it's all said and done. Now, part of this bipartisan deal, if it passes, would require ICE to not wear masks, to wear body cameras and use them. Body cameras would not only have to be on the agent's person, but actually turned on. No roaming raids, like I said, and that they would have, you know, greater penalties for not using warrants, et cetera, for trying to do no warrant arrests and things like that. Now, when it comes to this administration, is Donald Trump going to sign it? I have no idea. Is it going to pass the House? I have no idea. It sounds like the deal, this fund everything except for DHS deal, is going to pass the House when they come back in session. Now, Mike Johnson is not happy about it, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. He apparently called it signing on to opening Pandora's box, which is a dumb example, but he doesn't want to give the Democrats an inch on this. But this was a deal Donald Trump had supported. Now, one thing that has got Senator Lindsey Graham in a tizzy over this whole thing, and he's pissed off by, is there was a provision in there that allowed only Senate Republicans and just Senate Republicans to sue the DOJ for like $500,000 per instance of something happening to their phone. And what I'm talking about is in Jack Smith's investigation into January 6th, several members of Congress, all Republican, had their phones seized and other electronic devices. Well, it was either in the one big bullshit bill or it was in the November funding deal to keep the government open. In one of the two, they slipped in a provision that required or that allowed for the Senate Republicans to basically submit a bill to the DOJ for $500,000 each per instance that they allege when stuff happened to their phone records. And Lindsey Graham still thinks that should be in there. This bill would have been passed yesterday, but Lindsey Graham sunk it yesterday and said, no, we're not going to vote tonight. Nope, it's off the table. Ultimately, this bill passed the Senate with like a vote of 71 to 29, something like that. Now, some Republicans and some Democrats voted against it. The big thing is it had enough votes to pass, and they knew it. So those votes against it were performative at best. And it passed with a big enough margin, at least in the Senate right now, that if they had to override a veto and everybody voted the same way, they could pass it. Now, the House is expected to take it up sometime late Monday, which means all those government agencies that are affected by this shutdown will shut down for like a day, maybe two, potentially depends on what they are ordered to do or what they are told to do. In regards to it, maybe they keep everything open because there is some emergency funding they can use because they know it is only going to be for a day or two. Now, Mike Johnson could throw a monkey wrench in this whole works by saying, no, we're not going to vote for it and actually kill the bill on Monday in exchange for something else. I don't anticipate that happening, but there's a lot of time between here and there. You got the entire weekend. We don't know what else is going to come out. And, you know, as I was talking about earlier, with all of the files that came out from Epstein, this 3 million plus document cache, this administration may be looking for an off ramp and a way to distract from that. And they may say, well, okay, change of plans. I know we agreed on this deal, but kill the deal, partially shut the government down again, so the DOJ doesn't have to answer any questions about any of this, and we can distract from it. I was talking about it on my TikTok. It seemed like, with as bad as everything has gotten when it comes to ICE, immigration, foreign policy, the economy, that Donald Trump is using the Epstein files now, this big release, and I don't know that he agreed to have these released, but somebody in his administration made sure that it got released in part to, I think, distract from everything else. Now, this is going to be what people are going to talk about for a little bit until either there's nothing juicy that they can run with or until the next salacious thing comes along. And that, I think, is what they are working on, trying to figure out where the next target is, where can they shift everybody's focus away from the Epstein files. And as this people dig through the Epstein files, it may no longer be the distraction from everything else collapsing, and the rest of everything may be the story. I kept saying, as we were talking about the economy, as we were talking about Donald Trump talking about Greenland, as he went into Venezuela, all of it, I'm like, don't forget the Epstein files are out there. I know I said that multiple times, and here we are with a large cache of documents that people are digging through and sorting through, trying to figure out what's going on. And I think this is just this administration's way of distracting from it. So we'll have to see. We'll see if they decide to shut the government down to distract from the Epstein files again. And this time, like I said earlier, it would be a partial shutdown regardless. Certain things would be funded, including military pay, food stamps, SNAP benefits, Medicaid, child care payments, all those things would still go out. So it wouldn't be nearly as big of a story if the government shut down this time. But they may try to use it as a distraction because of what was released with regards to the Epstein files. We'll have to see. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of the Analytical Iowan podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today. I hope you have a great day, and we will be back tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.